Welcome to Building Culture of Trust and Information Security. My name is Jeremy Cox. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I am the Director of Technology for Washington County School District. I know many of you, although right now I can't see any of you. It's just blinding lights. So if somebody raises their hand, they may have to yell at me as well. But we're going to talk a little bit about building trust in information security, which is one of the things that I think oftentimes many of our organizations are challenged with. Is how do we get initiatives in information security to actually pass, right? To move forward. How do we move the needle? Because so often we take and we push out an initiative to change something and it fails due to users or user rejection or administrative rejection or something of that nature, right? So we're going to talk about what causes this great divide between information security and in IT in general, and how we can resolve it. So there are two significant issues. One is executive leadership, a divide between executive leadership and information security. Your second issue, we'll talk about in a minute, but this is a real critical one, because if you don't have buy-in right at the very beginning, with any project that you're trying to accomplish with your executive leadership, your C-level employees, then it's doomed to fail. So what happens? Okay. And I've been in these meetings many times where you go, okay, why is it that for some reason, we tell them, hey, we need to increase security in this fashion. And they come back and say, no, that's too much. We can't do that. Where are they coming from? Okay. Well, what you'll find is that many of your C-level perspectives they have the exact same goals as you do, but they have different concerns. Okay. So maybe you're suggesting something that they're concerned is going to decrease employee productivity or cause issues with employees just doing their basic jobs. There's also often a lack of understanding and communication. We're dealing with highly technical things, and trying to explain that to them, and they're looking at us and glazing over and going, what is it that you're talking about? It doesn't make always a lot of sense to them. There's also the cost versus the investment, right? What are we looking at as far as the cost to make these changes? How much money is that going to cost us? And what kind of difference is that really going to make? Okay. Sometimes our business goals are not aligned on the same level. Sometimes we're very much looking at, we want the ultra secure, and they're looking at it like, well, this is really, we don't need as secure as you think. And so the aligning of those goals can be different. And then this is oftentimes one of those things, the risk tolerances are different. Okay. So they may look at it and say, you know what, that's acceptable risk. And we may look at it and say, not a chance, right? We want that secure system. So how do we get ourselves on the same page? Okay, how do we bring ourselves on the same page? And that's what we're going to talk about a lot. But what this does is a lack of understanding and communication leads to a loss of trust. Okay, and then that leads to frustration, and then this is the worst case scenario, right? But it happens. Is the security team is seen as a problem. That's the last thing you want in your organization. You don't want to be seen as the team that just says, well, we just have to make it better and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They need to understand why. And if they don't understand the why and they're not aligned with it, then they start to see you as a problem. And then what happens is they stop listening. Okay. So it's really important that you never get to that bottom level issue. All right. Divide number 2 is the employees and information security. Okay. So this is a very common one. You can probably paint the next slides yourself here, but what we're going to talk about is some statistics. So 60% of employees reported frustration when IT's perceived inflexibility. Okay. 43% of users feel that IT security measures hinder daily tasks. 56% feel security policies negatively impact productivity, and 30% reported a productivity dip after major IT changes. Now, you probably all heard this, right? You could probably had guessed what those numbers look like yourself, because we see this all the time. Every time we make a change, we see, okay, people have to adjust, and that can be challenging. So when they're constantly adjusting, which they have to because technology constantly changes, this is the type of things that we get out of it. So how do we deal with this? But let's more of this. More than 80% of companies engage in some form of employee monitoring, okay? And I'm not going to ask by a raise of hands, but think about how much employee monitoring is going on, especially with remote work. 30% of employees feel uncomfortable with the level of monitoring in their organization. 59% of remote employees were concerned that monitoring software would allow their employers to spy on them without their consent. And employees who were aware of monitoring practices reported feeling less trusted by their employers. Okay, so can you see the kind of the picture that we're painting here? Employees often perceive IT language as condescending and overly complex when explanations use too much jargon, assuming a high level of technical knowledge. 35% of employees felt that IT staff communicated in a way that was condescending or dismissive. Okay, so we've all seen this, right? We've all seen users that come to us and they're paranoid, they're scared, they're fearful. They think that Big Brother is watching them. You've seen all of this type of stuff. And these types of things can negatively impact our ability to make significant change. But what I love is, look at that last statistic. 70% of end users felt more satisfied when the IT professional took time to explain the issue in simple terms. So how do we get from the users are frustrated, they don't get it, they don't know how to move forward, to the users are satisfied? And even if they have to make just a little bit of changes in their daily routine or learn something new, how do we get to them to that point? So this leads to all the other stuff. A lack of understanding communication leads again to loss of trust, which leads to fear. And then security is seen as a barrier rather than a benefit. Okay? We don't want to get there either. So how do we heal the divide? Well, I think the easiest way to describe how we heal the divide in security and in these two other groups is we remember that we're a team. We work together. Sometimes we sit in our offices and we think, they're just being, it's an ID10T problem, right? I mean, it's a PCAP, it's a chair to keyboard error. It's the user's fault. And we say that all the time. And you know what? And I get it. And between us, it's like, we got to blow off some steam. This is driving me crazy. I got this user over at this building who just can't get it. And in the middle of the night, they did all of these things and messed up everything, right? You've all been there. We've all had those frustrations. The challenge that we have is when those frustrations are now perceivable by them, it starts to change the way that they look at us, right? Instead of looking at us as a team together, now we're seen as it's those IT guys, right? They walked in the door, okay, what's wrong now, right? Have you ever had that happen? Walk into the door of the building and somebody comes up to you, okay, what's wrong? Like, it's happened to me at least, I cannot tell you how many times it's happened. It's like, do I ever just come to a place just to say hi? And I do, but right? When I started to hear that, I went, okay, yeah, got to change that perception, because the last thing we want is to be the harpers of doom, all right? We don't want to outstrip the HR directors out there. We don't want to be those people, okay? All right, so here we go. And my father was an HR director, so I can use those jokes. And anyway, so the way we change this is we change the way we communicate, right? The very first thing, we seek first to understand. We have to understand their point of view. oftentimes it kind of like we look in our wheelhouse and we say, okay, this is the way it works from a technical aspect, but we actually sat with an employee to actually see how their workflow works. Okay. If we could understand how their workflow works and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, we may understand how to better serve them. Okay. Number two, this is often challenging, right? We simplify and use non-technical language. Okay. How easy is it to describe something that's highly technical in a very non-technical way, right? That's not a simple ask. You know what's really great at coming up with those types of things? ChatGPT. So there are tools out there that can help you as you're trying to figure out, how do I describe this very highly technical thing to a non-technical group? And I love this part, right? We use stories and analogies. We just heard a lot about that, right? Because stories and analogies, those types of things can bring an emotional connection, right? And it can communicate a point in a way that we may not be able to. If we sit down and we talk about why when this port is open on the internet, it is a problem, they're going to look at us and like, what port are you talking about? Well, they're going to look at us and go, I don't even know. You just said, German or Greek or whatever it was, and they glaze over and we lose them, right? So we can use stories and analogies to help explain concepts. We want to foster cross-departmental collaboration on security initiatives. So when we go through and we say, okay, let's make major changes to the business system, okay, because there's a very huge risk associated with the way they're doing it. Have we gone and we talked to them about that risk? Have we explained what we're seeing so that they can come to that same conclusion themselves and then help them be part of the solution so that they own it? You know how much more people will take and actually support a solution if they truly own it themselves, that they were part of the development of that solution? They may not understand all of that happens on the back end. They won't, right? There's no way that they will understand it like you do. But they can be part of the development of that solution in a very rudimentary way, and they'll own it. Okay? We have to be transparent. Sometimes one of the things that we often do in IT is we just say, that won't work. Can't do that. Not going to do it. Won't do it. And that could be either because there's a technical limitation, or that could be that, hey, you know what? I just don't feel good about that. Tell them why. Even if they don't fully understand the why, if you try to explain the why, they will start to understand why it is that you can't make those changes that they want, and then come to resolution. You may have to say, well, we may be able to do this, but we can't do that. And this is why we can't do that. Okay. Or if you don't have the money to do it, well, I could do that if I had these resources. But anytime you try to direct a problem to a positive rather than a negative and a complete shutdown, it changes the whole stance of the way that you communicate with that team. And it makes them feel like that they're part of the discussion. Okay. Empathy and support. These are critical. So if we can show empathy for understanding where they're coming from and help them explain where we're coming from, okay, which is part of that seek first to understand before being understood, then we can change the way they view us. They can view us as, yeah, we understand that this is hard for you. We get it. These are all the things that we can do to help make that better, including we'll be happy to come do training. We'll happy to, make some tweaks there to make that better. But in the end, we're trying to make this goal. So let's work out a way together that we can make this goal. Okay. We need to be approachable, have user-friendly documentation. And lastly, we need to find balance. Okay, and adjust solutions to meet both the C-level and the employee needs and the security goals. So there's lots of different ways to cut this up, right? We don't always have to do, in order to meet our security goals, we don't always have to do it one way. Sometimes there's different branches that we can take in different ways that we can allow the C-level goals to be met and the user level goals to be met, or compromise to find common goals that work so that we don't give up on security and we don't get shut down on security, but we find something to move the needle. And it may only be a little bit at a time, but we're going to move the needle a little farther, okay? Because oftentimes what happens is we say, well, we want it all the way up here, but really and truly, they're like, well, we're down here. And to go from here to here sometimes can be really jarring and really challenging. So if we can kind of meet in the middle somewhere and then eventually start to move it farther and farther and farther, you'll get a lot more support versus going 100%. Okay. All right. So let me tell you a story about Washington County School District. We spent nearly a decade trying to change the image that we had with our users so that individuals would start to trust us and believe that we had their best interest in hand, which we do. We want to protect them. Okay. So over the past decade, we spent a lot of time sending out emails. And if they want to read them, they want to read them. If they don't, they don't. But what we found is the more that we sent out emails that were applicable to what they were dealing with day to day and the challenges that they were facing, the more they would read them. In fact, I'd get emails back say, hey, do you mind if I share this with my family? This is really good information. Okay. We'd have those types of things all the time. And so we would send out these regular emails of things that were currently going on, the threats that they were facing, to help them be able to mitigate those threats. And they were applicable to them. And we used language in those that they understood and they could relate to and they could see a benefit from. And what this started to do is it started to create that bond of trust, right? They went, okay, like they're giving us good information and good data that is actually useful in real life. And it took some time to get a lot of people to start reading these, right? It's not like we don't get 50,000 emails in our inbox every day, right? So what differentiates between an email that you want to read and the emails you just hit archive and delete, okay? You have to have value in it, right? And that may take a long time to gain because it's kind of word of mouth. It's like, have I seen value in that email before? Maybe I'd actually want to skim through this. And the other thing is, well, how long is it? And right, there's all sorts of things you can do to keep that simple, good information that they're going to use and it's going to be helpful to them, okay? So rather than focus on what they should not do, we focused on explaining why we would not personally do what we didn't want them to do. Does that make sense? So we just said, instead of saying, don't do this, we said, well, if you were to get this and you did this, this is what would happen. Which gave them the same conclusion of don't do this, right? So we spun it just a little bit different so that we said, hey, here's the context of why this is important. And it allowed them to make that conclusion in their head, which also means that it's going to stick better, okay? And we use simple examples to explain complex issues and put it in terms that they could relate to. Let me give you an example of an email that we sent. So not too long ago, this was actually later on in this process, we sent an email that talked about, we realized that we had a huge problem with individuals using their organizational email for personal purposes, okay? So they were signing up for every type of personal account. All their, Apple accounts were tied to it. I mean, it was like rampant, right? And every time I walk in, I'm like, oh, no, you pull up somebody's computer and work on it, and like everything's attached to their Wash K-12 account. And we'd sit there and we go, this is not good, right? We'd have employees leave, and then they call us up and like, hey, can you reactivate that email address? I just found out that this is all attached to that. Okay. So you're shaking your heads and laughing because you've all dealt with this, right? Now, in a government organization, who can tell? Can you all raise anybody who thinks that using their business or government email account for personal stuff is a good idea? Raise your hand. Okay? Because all of us know why we would never do that, right? We all get it. So what we did is we sent out an email and we told them everything. We were totally transparent. We told them that, listen, all of your government emails are subject to grandma. They could be grandma'd at any time, which means that you could send out a Government Records Management Act request, and we may have to release those emails. And even if they didn't fall under the grandma purview, somebody's going to actually have to go through your email to find out if it is. So do you really want someone going through your personal email? I mean, we laid it all out, and we explained every reason why we would never do that. And then we said, okay, now you have the information. This is, we don't recommend that you do this, but we didn't say don't do it. We just gave them all the reasons not to do it. Because at the end, they read the email, they went, I'm never doing this again. In fact, we got more calls about, how do I move all of this stuff off of here? Because I don't want to do this. And so it changed the entire narrative of how it worked, simply by changing the way we approached it. Okay? So afterwards, what happened? So we built this trust with our employees, and we used the exact same techniques to explain the new security initiatives. The latest security initiatives that we went through, we used these exact same techniques. We came through, we explained why it was important. We helped them to come to that exact same conclusion themselves. And then the results were fantastic. We used test groups to determine impact. We said, okay, we're going to turn it on for this school. And you guys let us know how it works and what you need and how we can support it. And so, and we chose that school wisely. Like we're going to choose a school that is representative of of most of the schools. It has the majority of the users, that we've got every type of different user that might be there. And then we ran through that process, and then we found solutions. Every time they ran into a problem, we said, okay, what if we did this? Would this help? And we worked with them. Okay. We enlisted the buy-in from our executive staff. We discussed all the available options with them, and then allowed them to become part of the solution. Okay? We talked to them. We said, okay, we can do this. These are the options we have. This is the things that we can do. And these are the things that, we're required to do. And then we allowed them, by using stories and discussions and analogies, to come to the exact same conclusion that we had already really come to. Okay? So they became part of the solution. So it was very successful. So the afterword is this: good and empathetic communication is the key to success. If you want to be successful, figure out, how do you communicate an initiative? How do we get buy-in? How do we have users that are excited about a change because it's going to help them rather than hinder them? And that is good and empathetic communication. So again, we change the way we communicate. Seek first to be understood. We simplify. We use stories and analogies. We foster cross-departmental collaboration. We be transparent. We use empathy and support. We find balance and adjust. Because good, empathetic communication changes culture. Because we truly are on the same team. Most of your organizations, you will find that users and employees and C-level have very common goals, but the way they see the path to get to that goal is very different, because everybody understands things just a little bit differently, okay? And everyone has their unique abilities and skills and knowledge. We see things from a very technical standpoint, but every person needs to feel like they are part of the team. And you notice I bolded the feel, because they really need to feel like they are part of the team. It is all perception. Every person should feel valued because good teams recognize each person's value contribution to the team, and they work fantastically. Okay. But changing culture takes time. This is not something that you will be able to do tomorrow. This is not something you will be able to do in the next 6 months. This is something that will take years to develop. If you feel like you're in an organization where the culture is such that the trust is not there between your employees and your IT department, changing that perception will take time. Okay? There is a, oh, you know what? I do have audio. Can you give me audio? Okay. There's a great YouTube video here that we're going to show you that emphasizes this point clearly. My brothers! And of course, the audio is coming through my laptop rather than to you.
Venebrato! My brothers! This day you fought with honor. This day you vanquished those that mean to smite us. The Dark Lord forged his enemies to wreak their terror, but we persevered and slayed them forthwith. In the years to come, they will sing our victory song, as we sung for our forefathers.
Sorry. Sorry, guy. Just one thing I thought I might bring up.
Whatever is it, brother of the watch, fellow kinsman?
Yeah, this.
Honored knight of the third men.
This is what I want to talk about. We are using way too many words, guys.
How dost thou mean, proud warrior of the North? Brave son of the Ark?
There. That's what we could really speed things up around here if we just cut down on the wordage.
How so, brother of the cloth? Defender of the North?
Well, like in battle today, when you yelled, I'm paraphrasing, but noble horde, raise thy shields, from yonder field of battle approaches, is it thy enemies' arrows? Yeah, next time, just yell duck. I reckon. You know, I mean, a lot of us died before you finished talking.
So, not speak in such an elongated way for the sake of the time.
Exactly. Actually, and just while we're on the topic, we were just talking about this morning. The tales that we tell, the one about the ring and the short, hairy foot people, maybe that could be just one story, you know, instead of 6 3-hour unnecessarily long stories.
Some merit you may have in your words, my brother.
Yeah.
I see how my verbose retelling may elongate the...
I don't think you do.
No?
Yeah, even this, the victory speech you're making, I don't know. I just think maybe just say we won or something. You know, you guys with, yeah?
Yeah. Yes. Your words have resonated deep in my mind, my brother.
Again, I don't think they have, because he's still doing it. Yes, go to weapon.
We won!
Yeah!
That's good.
All right. We won. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful SAINTCON.